Coons, Democrat of Delaware, serves on the Foreign Relations Committee. He's also a ranking member of the Appropriations Subcommittee on Defense, and he joins me now. Senator, I want to ask, start with some of the reporting that we've had about these sort of, A, question of munitions, and B, this question of just the degree to which even the one thing that it seemed the war had maybe accomplished, the degradation of Iran's military capabilities, whether we really actually even know that. What is your understanding of that?
Well, Chris, my sense is that we've all along known that Iran has a massive reservoir of drones, of cheap, lethal drones that they can keep firing day after day after day to keep the Strait of Hormuz closed, to strike civilian targets in the region like airports and hotels, gas and oil works, and that they have successfully launched at our embassies and our bases. A principal goal of this war, at least as the U.S. military has described it, was downgrading their ability to make and to fire advanced ballistic missiles. There's been some progress there, but as the Ukrainians have demonstrated in their defense against Russia's war of aggression, they make new drones by the hundreds every single day in a scattered array of garages and basements. I think that the Iranians will be able to keep firing drones at us over and over and over that cost $20,000 to $40,000, and we're intercepting them with missiles and interceptors that cost hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. That just doesn't work out well for us and our allies, as our reserves of sophisticated interceptors are getting lower.
You are on that appropriations subcommittee, and the cost of this is a lot. It's estimated between $1 and $2 billion a day. Just the Tomahawk missiles. People have talked about refueling aircraft that have been hit, on and on and on. It's our understanding from public reporting the Pentagon is seeking a $200 billion war supplemental. Are you a yes or no on that?
Look, Chris, I'm not going to vote for a supplemental that's a backdoor way to authorize a war where President Trump never came to the American people and to Congress. He's contemplating sending thousands of our troops into harm's way. He doesn't have a clear justification or target for this war. He's talked about regime change. He's talked about securing enriched uranium. He's talked about sinking their Navy and degrading their missile capability. But he hasn't delivered to the American people a clear argument for why they need hundreds of billions of dollars. And Chris, I'll remind our viewers that last year in reconciliation, they took away hundreds of billions of dollars for health care and nutrition programs from middle Americans to pay for a massive tax cut. Where's that money? How's it been spent? And why is it a good idea to, instead of helping keep America healthy, to spend that money on a war of choice in the Middle East?
I quoted this in the intro, the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, which has been, I think, in the time that I've covered politics in Washington and this issue, a fairly vocal advocate of a more confrontational approach with Iran, let's say, basically publishing a piece trying to kind of do this to the president about some kind of ground operation in Karg Island. It strikes me that there's pretty bipartisan cross-ideological concern right now. You're hearing it from Republicans on the Hill who are getting out of briefings, and Democrats as well, and now this think tank that it's possible we're on the precipice of something very, very dangerous that could be really bad for U.S. service members. Are you concerned as well?
Of course, Chris. Look, we've already lost 13 American service members, and hundreds have been seriously injured. The cost to the average American is going up and up. As gas is now $4 a gallon, it's gone up $1 in the last month. And the disruption to the global economy, we're already seeing it in the rising price of a barrel of oil and the lowering values of the stock market. So the fact that we have a president who's so easily distracted by shiny objects, whether a Sharpie pen or a new gold tractor, has to be alarming, as he is weighing the ultimate decision whether to introduce thousands of troops in an attempt at pulling off a Venezuela-style, a quick, clean effort to take over Iran's oil. It won't be quick, it won't be clean, it won't be costless, and it may well tie down thousands of our troops and cost huge casualties. I hope that our president will reconsider and that the folks who are urging him to back away from introducing our troops onto the ground in Iran will succeed, because the costs will be just too high for the American people.
There was someone at the National Security Council who was on the Iran desk, and his name is Nate Swanson. And days before Trump attacked Iran, he published a piece basically predicting precisely how this would go. Iran would draw the U.S. into a quagmire if attacked. That he would, that essentially they would fire their missiles and drones at the oil infrastructure of nearby countries. They would hold the Strait of Hormuz. This individual was basically chased out of the National Security Council because an Islamophobic and bigoted crank named Laura Loomer chased him out. And he's no longer at the Iran desk. And when the president got in front of cameras the other day, he said, well, no one predicted they would do exactly what this individual and everyone who worked the Iran desk predicted. How much does it matter that a crank is essentially has veto power over personnel when you're trying to competently pull off American foreign policy or strategy?
Chris, it matters a lot that the Trump administration and President Trump in particular is listening as much to online influencers as he is to our intelligence community and our military, and frankly, seasoned and capable folks who have views he just doesn't want to hear. Part of how we got into this mess, Chris, was that President Trump learned the wrong lesson from the previous 2 times he struck Iran. He killed Qasem Soleimani, the head of the IRGC, in his first term, and he was warned there would be big blowback, but it didn't come. He bombed Iran last year, attacking their nuclear enrichment sites, and he was warned there would be big blowback, but it didn't come. This time he announced one of the goals of the war was regime change, and so he should have foreseen that the IRGC would use every tool they've got and shut down the Strait of Hormuz and strike targets all over the Gulf. That would have been obvious to anyone who has studied the region or thought about history. But President Trump hasn't listened, hasn't learned, and is now putting us at great risk.
You just got to hope he's getting better advice in the ballroom. Senator Chris Coons, thank you so much for your time.